Reads, the podcast of San Jose State University's Read Magazine, California's oldest literary journal. I'm Peggy Pollard. This episode, my guest is Professor Juan Felipe Herrera, the judge of Read Magazine's 2023 Edwin Markham Prize for Poetry, with the poet Linda Ravenswood's winning entry, The Children Turn Themselves into Ice. You can view the interview with Linda Ravenswood here on In the Reads podcast. A little about our judge. Juan Felipe Herrera was the 21st Poet Laureate of the United States in 2015 to 2017. He's an American poet, performer, writer, cartoonist, teacher, and activist. Born in Fowler, California, to Mexican immigrant farm workers, he's a graduate of UCLA, Stanford, and the Iowa Writers Workshop. In the 1960s, Herrera had foundational participation in the Chicano movement. Professor Herrera chose the winning poem from 3 finalists for the Read Magazine's 2023 edition. The Children Turn Themselves into Ice depicts the point of view of a young girl faced with crossing the border from Mexico into Texas and needing to turn herself into ice, the Border Patrol authorities, or in her imagination, turning into frozen ice, becoming glacial and floating down the river. So welcome to In the Reads, Professor Herrera. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
Oh, thank you so much. This is a great pleasure for me. Thank you for having me judge the poetry and just beautiful writers and lovely poems. And I'm always inspired by the poetry that comes in, written by people's students. People just want to get into poetry, and this was really beautiful. And getting a prize, that's such an interesting and most inspiring. There were many days and many years where we all tried to get into those contests, but it was almost impossible. And now it's possible. And it's a great poem. Let me just say a few words. I really love the interview you did with Linda Ravenswood. It was an incredible interview. I think it's a master class. You can and people can view it as that too, if you want. There's so many things that Linda talks about regarding this poem. In a way, it's about all poetry, and it's also about the migrant experience and the immigrant experience. And she really cuts into, or delves into, or slides into, or enters the life of this poem and the life of migrants and the life of U.S., Mexico, and Spain relationships through time. And there's just so much in the discussion that you have or had with Linda Ravenswood. I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed how she read her poem. It was she became the poem as she read it, and her voice changed as she read it. It was an amazing moment. So I consider that a masterclass. Beautiful, a beautiful moment with the interview. Both
Thank
of you.
you. I learned so much in the interview as well. She just depths of poetry that I had no idea about.
Oh, that's true. And so it's a great title too. And I'm glad this is all about San Jose State also, and creative writing program and the writers and the magazine, the Read magazine. It's good to have those magazines. We used to just crawl all around San Francisco and the Bay Area looking for those magazines. Just the cover of those magazines were inspiring, or the titles of the magazines. I would delight just by looking at the title or at the cover until I found the actual magazine. And it's titled, Linda Ravenswood poem is titled, The Children Turn Themselves into Ice. It's interesting that they turn themselves. They're not turned. They turn themselves into ice. The children turn themselves into ice. I'm a flag. Are you ice? I can be quiet. I could imagine, I could pretend you never existed, and the walk across the desert a dream. I could imagine your rig is an ice cream truck, your siren the song that calls me to the street. I can imagine the desert is a street, this border jag, the way to school, this fence, the fence between 2 grand properties, my father the king of the mountain and me, the land to the west, my uncle of the domain beyond. There are orchard and olive trees and peaches, fish ponds, and of my mother in a diaphanous dress. I can imagine a movie, my pockets full of corn. I heard a little girl on the opposite side, the Rio Grande, successfully turned herself into ice and floated downstream. She was that kind of glacial child who tripped a little, left a little, and flowed. When she finally came to the sluice gate in La Paz, it was just enough to scoop out of the water. There was just enough story left. Remember everything, but be quick as stone. Imagine stone. Be the kind of book that holds oblivion. If you can be that quiet, if you can be that useful, if you can be that slate gray, pequeña Joana semilla de manzana, little Joanna seed of apple, turn yourself into ice. I mean, there's so much in this poem. This will last hours and days in discussion. Um, so
Beautiful reading.
oh, thank you. I just love this poem. And as we read it, as we read it, we find the poem. And as we read it, we enter the poem. And as we read it, we live the poem. And that's, I guess, the many lives of poetry, of a poem, and the many lives of a poet. We can write, we can scribble, but all of a sudden we enter another life. And all of a sudden we enter more than one life. And all of a sudden we create a child. And all of a sudden we're speaking to that child. And all of a sudden we're embracing that child. And all of a sudden we're way out here, so far away, and yet we are connected and in harmony. And that's the amazing, what is it? Amazing sense, power, relationship with a poem. It's not just words. It's not just stanzas. It does have those things, of course, but there's a lot of creativity going on, and there's a lot of, what is it? There's a lot of exposure of the depth that we carry, the depth of something that's perhaps bigger than us, the depth of a people, of a part of the earth, of a history, of herstories, of one child, of an incredible experience that has tangled together, and the depth beyond time, or the depth of time. She spoke in, Linda spoke in your amazing interview with her of the Spanish conquest, quote unquote, of the colonialism, of what happened between both, especially with the Spanish, bringing upon the Aztecs or Mexicas, smallpox, arms, attack, and massacre. All those experiences are still floating around Mexico and Central America and Latin America. Without the Spanish, without that incredible and terrible contact, Mexicanos, Latinos, Latinx, Chicanos, Chicanas, Latin Americans, people here in the United States, we wouldn't be who we are. And we have had to deal with those impacts and transform ourselves, which is also part of this poem. When you cross the border, or when you attempt to cross the border, or when you decide to make that 2,000-mile trek from Honduras or from other sites in Latin America, or very close, maybe it's just Tijuana, or maybe Ensenada, or maybe Guatemala or El Salvador, you begin a process of passage. And there's many more things to say, like Linda did. I mean, she said so much. I took notes, as many as I could. But when we began a journey, we also began a rite of passage. And a rite of passage includes many of these items and elements in this poem. It includes a lot of kind of multi-dimensional experience of colors, of pain, of being told who you are and what you must do and where you belong, and suffering. And then later on, there's emergence. And then who you are, you have a different status. It's like coming all the way from Honduras to the United States, and all of a sudden you're a different person. You have a different identity, even though you don't have it in words, but you feel it and you become it. And that's a whole other discussion. So I really enjoy this poem, and I'm so glad that I was invited to judge this poem and other poetry.
Mm.
And I was so moved by the poems, by all of them. And this is most interesting. It has what? One giant stanza, then one middle-sized one, and then it gets smaller. And then it ends with the most interesting, kind of mystical, surprising. It kind of changes the entire poem, the last two lines. Yeah, and it's in Spanish and it's in English. A pequeña Joana semilla de manzana, turn yourself into eyes. So that's that idea about the rite of passage. You're becoming something different. In this case, into eyes. Now, what could that be? Is this poem a chunk of ice? Maybe it is. Maybe it is one, two, three, four, five pieces of ice at the very beginning, and then quiet ice, and then three regular quote unquote stanzas. You know, maybe they're little glaciers, or maybe they're just human beings melting into water. And then this seed, what is it? An apple seed. And it's small. It's small. She didn't say grande Joanna. She said pequeña Joanna, which is a little tiny. Pequeña is tiny. Chica is smallish. And Joanna, Juana, semilla. It's in the middle there. It's almost over. De manzana, of apple. Wow, apple. That's interesting. The apple.
Mhm. Now, I
Turn your
think there was a connection with Johnny Appleseed.
There's a
Yeah,
connection with Johnny Appleseed,
Appleseed.
but
Yeah,
but Jo-
Ivana Appleseed.
but Johnny took off. Turn yourself into ice. So it was just a lovely poem. It has so many goodies in it,
Mm.
and it's a journey on itself.
And Linda said this is part of physical poetry where the arrangement of the text on the page is very significant. And that impressed you as well. It sounds like
Oh,
you're seeing meaning in just the shapes of how she arranged the text.
oh yeah, there's so much in a poem, and we don't really talk about that much in workshops, which is good. It's kind of good to discover things, than to follow a pattern that's kind of given to us. And this has a lot of those things, right? The space. The space is always fun. The blanks are always fun. We operate in that. You just walk outside and the whole street is a big blank. And of course it has concrete and asphalt, a bunch of cars and a couple of houses. But in between all that, there's space. And beyond the rim of the horizon, there's infinity. So it's kind of similar, kind of a similar design. So that's fun. I would definitely follow some of these experiments in this poem. I definitely would. I could imagine it says, I could pretend it says, then it goes right at you. You never existed. You never existed. Oh God,
Wow.
we're going to have to unpack that one.
Even that's like, yeah. So you did such a beautiful reading. Can I read some of your comments, judges' comments that
Oh
we
yeah, sure.
book? So Juan Felipe Herrera's, he called the work a magnificent poem, a poem of address. It
Yeah.
speaks to a complex figure dwelling in the inscape and outscape of the text. It acknowledges its imagination. The speaker and perhaps the writer and or the reader are actively involved, and there is a glacial child. So we must ask, what is a glacial child? Is it a floating, dissolving, distant, threatening, life-making, jagged, deep, destroying subject? Does it have life? It must be transparent. It transforms as it melts into what? These are some of the existential questions and conditions that the poem carries. itself a glacier of text, broken into bodies of different shapes, densities, colors, rhythms, destinations, desires. The glacier text child itself moves to the right of its universe, the page, the blank space in italics. Abruptly, it raises its last turn, its last call, or face or body or breath, and is told to end, and tells us, turn yourself into ice. This is key and code to the poem, transcend, become, dissolve into the flow of life. Harden, apple girl. I think that's what you just said. Even more. So
Oh, it's a good, very good poem, very great poem.
my mind is expanding with every sentence that you say of the meanings to it. And that's so amazing. That's what poetry is so amazing. Like it's so short, but yet every part of it you like carries this huge, deep meaning.
Yes, it's great. It's good. And it's very direct, it's kind of you're not going to find a line that's uh, trying to be poetic. You're not going to find that line. And you're not going to find a line that likes juxtapositions and turnovers and experimental, and all that's fun, when we experiment and we tear the poem up, and we put items in it and, pictures, and we do cross out some lines. All that's a lot of fun. But this is very direct, and that's also a great thing to do. Gerald Stern, as you know, one of our poets that passed away recently, I think he was in his 80s. One of my professors at Iowa. His poetry is just Gerald Stern. His poetry is just like it's just water going across the page, or a conversation, right? It's just flowing, a conversation across the page, conversation with the reader, conversation, and yet it's so warm, it's so real, and it's so emotional. Also, I just love his poems, and
With
yeah.
Linda, every line of this, a lot of poetry is what's not there. But her deep experience with the Chicana movement and the codexes and her research and poetry and like decades and decades of deep experience dealing with literature that they uncovered, so that this is it just flows because it's just one part of this huge, deep reservoir inside the poet.
That is true. That's what a poem is. It's it's born in a reservoir, and it's in the poet's life, existence, and what is it? Collective unconscious. All that is where this poem boils from.
Can you speak to, and you were involved, you said, with the codexes and the beginnings of the Chicana movement. Can you give a little more context with your experience in that and as it relates to this poem and Linda's work?
Oh, yes, 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 yes. And it has some of those elements of those early days. I began uh, playing with and experimenting with poetry, maybe 1960, much earlier, but maybe when I got really into it, probably 1965, 66, when I was in high school, because I began kind of cruising through libraries. I like to hang out in libraries. And people were talking a lot about the surrealists at that time, in the 60s, about the surrealists in Europe, of course, and looking them up. And then I had friends that were older than me that weren't at the school I was, but I just bumped into them, became friends. And they talked about, Dali. Dali was a painter and a poet and a writer. And Breton, André Breton of the surrealist, first group of surrealists, and Dali was part of that, and a whole crew. And I looked up their work. I go, oh, geez, I just love this work. It's hard to interpret sometimes, but it's not about interpreting. It's just about letting go. It's like tearing who you are out. It's like bringing out that who you are, those deep instincts and those deep dreams and that deep nightmares and the deep tensions, and your subconscious, just pulling it all out and putting it in language, that would be a surrealist poem because you're not going to try to make sense. You're not going to try to be rational. Uh, there's a lot of irrational, we have a lot of irrational, boiling um, messaging inside of us, in a sense. And
I guess
it's
that's
not
what
going to go.
surreal means. It's like it's not reality, it's something inside of us that's
Yeah, that's right.
hard to feel
It's
experience.
surreal. It's a super reality. And we never really expose it because it's personal or because we don't really understand what we're going through or because it's just too deep and too wild and too crazy and too lustful and too hot and too weird. And we want to be that. We want to be, with a tie or a nice coat and, go to what are the stores? Go to a Macy's and get something that really fits well. You're going to look so good and people are going to really like you and you'll take a very proper photograph. It's not that person. The subconscious is
Ah,
this rumbling stone that's breaking apart and shooting out rays and
ah,
liquids and
okay.
liquids.
Yeah, I'm picturing it. This is very cosmic.
And that's
Cosmic
right.
inside here.
And it's very cosmic. So that's where the surrealists, that's what they really wanted to do. They wanted to bring out that self that wasn't going to be the standard self. It was going to be that boiling, intense self
Mm.
that needs to come out. So I really liked that. All of a sudden I just loved it, and I wanted to write like Breton, and I also wanted to write like Anthony Dartot, the great French surrealist, and also actor before he became a surrealist in the 20s. And he came to Mexico, to Chihuahua, northwestern state in Mexico. Antonin Artaud, Artud, and he participated in a peyote ceremony with the Tarahumara Indian uh,
Mm.
peoples.
Copper Canyon, Tarahumara.
I don't know about Copper Canyon. That's right.
Oh.
And so he came back with that experience of hallucination, of drumming, of collective chanting, and the intensity that all that rituals provide. Like we
Mm.
said earlier, a rite of passage, you start being, hey, hi everybody, this is Juan Felipe. But when you go into rite of passage, you go through a lot of kind of multi-sensual experience. There's shouting, there's music, there's drumming, there's dancing, there's heat, there's fire, and then also kind of a educational or more of like a wisdom moment where you meet the elders and there's an exchange, and you begin to learn maybe the wisdom that's being given to you because you're coming from no one to someone, and that someone needs to know a larger set of values or visions or understandings
Mm.
or is being given
Mm. It sounds
value.
like the process involves all your senses. You're in your psyche, your physical dancing and vocalizing, and yeah, so
Yeah,
you're getting all aspects of your human experience and sensibilities involved as you're ready to prepare you to receive this greater wisdom, be part of a greater society. That's
yeah, of the secret society in a way. But you're right, the greater society. And you come out as a different person. You have a different status. That Antonin Artaud experienced that, came back to France and wanted to write like that. He wanted to write that experience. So then he created language, not our day-to-day language, but kind of a mixed up, pattern of words and upside down letters and uh, things that you're grunting and that you're going through if you're, boiling in that dark cave with sound and drumming and chanting and sweat and stones heating up and fire burning in front of your face. He wanted to have that sensuality in his poetry. So I really like that too. So then I began to write kind of theater pieces using that kind of language, which was a poem, but it was also for me like a performance piece. And during those 60s, we also had, as you know, In the East Coast, we had experimental theaters. In the West Coast, we had experimental theaters, San Francisco. And one of them was the Café La Mama Theater from New York. And I wanted to create a theater like that too. So that kind of theater involved you being locked up in a wooden chest, and then they bring out the wooden chest, and then it would be cracked open on stage, and you would pop out of it. You probably would be naked, and you'd have this red sauce dripping from your body, from your skin,
Wow.
and then right, and that was part of the performance because it was kind of multi-sensual. It was structured different. It was upside down, sideways. And I said, oh, I got to do a theater like that. I got to put a theater together like that. And so those were my early inspirations, kind of a surreal theater and surreal poetry. And of course, Federico Garcia Lorca everybody was talking about Federico Garcia Lorca. We didn't get Federico Garcia Lorca in our class, but we got Thomas Mann in our class. We got Kafka in our classes.
Wow.
Uh, and so we got those powerful writers. They were also influential. Lorca, you pick up Lorca's poetry, and all of a sudden you're in a different world, and you want to write like him. So lyrical at the same time, hard to figure out, very complex and abstract, but that abstraction comes right through. And so good in Spanish as well, and his drawings. I was inspired by his drawings. One is called Cut Hands. He has a drawing of two hands bleeding, and manos cortadas, cut hands. I go, oh God, manos cortadas. Oh my God.
Sounds awful.
It was hitting me hard. So that was my high school years. Those were my high school years.
Oh, wow.
When I came to UCLA in 1967, they were giving affirmative action scholarships, which is a great thing. I wouldn't have been able to afford it. And so I just jumped in. And there were only 60 Chicanos at UCLA in 1967. I'm sure someone's going to say maybe there are five more, but there were like 63 Chicanos, Latinos there. And
LA, so that's not representative of the population.
something happened with that affirmative action. But we did have students from Wilmington and from East LA, but very few. And so once I jumped in, then I took literature and German translation into English. So that's where I got Thomas Mann and Hermann Hesse. And I would imagine that going from Dali, André Breton, Antonin Artaud, to Lorca, and then to Thomas Mann and Kafka. And you put all those on your table, all those materials on your table, and you got quite a lot to bounce off and work with. But the bigger piece was that we were all concerned, as we were all concerned, with what's going on in our lives and in our communities, our society, and in our ethnic group in many ways, and all ethnic groups. So what could we do? I grew up.
This is kind of the start of the Chicana movement.
It was right. It was more very defined start of the Chicano movement in the mid 60s. And what really kicked it off, it was already boiling maybe in the late 50s. The Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, farm workers movement. Wow. And so since I grew up
celebrating today and naming streets after them.
Way to go. Let's do that. Let's do that. And since many of us were children of farm workers or grandmothers and grandfathers who worked in the fields or were still working in the fields and parents still working in the fields. So we had that, we knew what that was about. But because Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta were so vocal and so successful and twisting and almost breaking the arms of the of the big companies that didn't want to make one single move and to make life better for the farm worker. And because Dolores Huerta was just so articulate and so intelligent, the big wine moguls and the big moguls who owned all that land saw her coming. When they saw her coming, they go, oh God, here comes Dolores Huerta. And they're lawyers because they didn't want to boycott lettuce. right?
Yeah.
That's what the idea, one of the first causes was to boycott those letters.
I remember that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
So
oh, that was a new thing, a boycott. What does that mean? We're not supposed to
the
eat lettuce, and we did that.
so next time you see Dolores Huerta, say thank you, Dolores, because when the lawyers for the growers and for the wine CEOs,
And there was an
so
issue over the short hoe that they forced them, you could only use a short, so you'd have to bend over and kill their back every day doing this, so they could tell when someone was working or not working.
exactly, and then the
Wow, very
pesticides,
impressive.
and then the famous pesticides, and
Oh,
then the abuse.
mhm.
And all that stuff, and no promotions, and the money was terrible, if any.
And
So
it's
when,
still the backbone of our economy is all these migrant farm workers and this issue today.
you're right, you can't have a hamburger and a glass of wine without farm workers. Everything in a hamburger has
That's
been
right.
picked, right?
The
And
food on our tables every day is handpicked by these
that's
people.
right. And all the poultry and all the beef is processed, which is a terrible thing. It's in the slaughterhouses,
Mm.
and who's there? The migrants
Mhm.
working in that field. So right, so when Dolores Huerta was coming and the lawyer was there to back up the mogul, the lawyer would go, "Oh no, this is Dolores Huerta. What am I going to do?" She could argue anybody down to the floor. So she made that come through. So we knew about that, and we got the feeling about that. We were related to that, and that's what got our writing going and our presentations going. One of our first big efforts was in '65 with the Rose Workers, not far from Fresno. Luis Valdez was part of that, the great playwright, filmmaker of La Bamba.
Mm.
So that I started writing for the farm worker, and many of us did. And right, that became a movement, like you say. It became a movement for the farm workers, and it turned into the Chicano movement as well, like you said.
Wow. A huge history of California and this whole area. Thank you. And you were deeply involved in that.
I
Um,
was deeply involved.
yeah. Linda mentioned the codexes that they were discovering, the uh, Aztec codexes that she'd had a group that did research on. You mentioned that as well.
Oh yeah, there was just so much to look at. We wanted to know about the farm workers. We were farm working families. We wanted to get that together and provide social change for farm workers.
Mm.
All those things we mentioned, we wanted to change. It was kind of the conversation that was going on, which was the issue of identity and ancestors. That
Mm.
became a very important piece to our puzzle. Who are we? Uh, what's our life about, and what are we going to do about it here in the United States and the Southwest?
Where did
And
you come from as far as history?
where do we come from? And right, everyone was talking about identity, Black power, women's power, gay power, on and on, Native American movement, red power, all the powers were lit up. Gay identity, all that was lit up. Everything was moving and protesting and changing, and all groups were involved. Some of us worked together, some of us didn't. So as you know, in the women's movement, it was like just revolution. So we had like 5 revolutions going on at the same time.
Wow.
It was,
Five prongs.
it was
Okay.
5 revolutions.
It's
So imagine
all in
going.
the 60s. I saw it. I was a kid at the time, but yeah, the
Yeah.
turbulence is
So that's what it was. There were buttons, there were flags, there were marches, there were protests, and there were journeys. And there was writing, and there was poetry, and there was women's theater, women's radical theater, and there was black theater, and there was Chicano theater. I just got into that immediately. Immediately, I said, I'm going to form a teatro, a people's theater, and I'm going to work on it, and I'm going to bring in whoever wants to come in, and we're going to have jazz, and we're going to have performance, and we're going to have poetry, and we're going to have that surrealistic East Coast style. I want to do that too. So that took off. Maybe
this is
around
in
40.
LA area.
This is at first it was right in LA area at UCLA, which is smaller.
Mhm.
And then we started touring, going to farm worker camps and then going to high schools and going to prisons. And it started rolling forward, as well as all the other revolutions. And so it was really exciting. Writing poems, writing plays, performing, gathering groups, going to community events and creating new ones, and going all the way to Granger, Washington, and doing a presentation for the farm workers.
Wow.
Just good
Like
old.
you're waking the sleeping giant of community that been there, has been working hard and just giving him a voice and the
That's
creative
true.
energy.
Yeah, yeah, honoring that voice, that is true. So that was the kind of like the fulcrum of my early days, and I think everyone else that was involved, like I said, the women's movement, gay movement, Red Power movement,
Mm,
and Asian movement also,
mhm.
and African American movement, Black Student Union at UCLA. I mean, it was all just rumbling. I don't
Wow.
know what happened to the classes. I don't know who went to classes. Maybe I went to a couple of
What's the
classes.
classic experience of doing it? Wow.
Sociology, yeah. So then a question came to me. I said, we're talking about identity. I think that's okay. Chicano, okay, Chicano, okay. Mexican American, no, not too okay. Mexican feels good, but it's only Mexican. What happened to the United States? Who are we here? I said, okay, that's a good conversation. I said, but if we really want to know who we are, we have to go all the way into the rainforests of Chiapas. We have to go all the way to the first groups that were encountered by the Spanish. And the first group was the Totonac of the Veracruz coast, Atlantic coast. And the second group, of course, were the Aztecs. And they were just slaughtered.
Oh,
I said, I got to go there. And they were pushed out into the least arable lands that you can barely grow one seed of popcorn on because they kept the best land, the Spanish. So I
mm,
said, I have to go to those places. And one of the last places where the Spanish wanted to colonize were in the mountains, and that's the land of the Huichol peoples. And I said, we have to go there too. So I want to take a camera crew at UCLA, Chicanos that are working, in the film department that are taking film. And I'm going to bring some friends that I know, and we're going to have still cameras also so we can take photographs. I don't know where we're going to get the recorder, but we're going to go with a recorder too and have interviews with the Lacandon Mayas in the rainforest, with the Huichol in the Sierras, and with the Totonac on the coast of Veracruz. We got to go there. It has to be like this. So then I put together a proposal for the Chicano Research Center at UCLA, a brand new institution, an amazing one. And we got funded. They were really good to us. We got funded and put my crew together. They were good people. We were all flying high and what we were doing had a lot of ideas. So I said, let's do this. So that's what we need. We need to get there. We need some kind of truck. So I said, Manuel, you just said that your father got a brand new pickup? Oh, yeah, he did. He's in San Isidro. Well, guess what? If you want to go with us, you better get that truck because we have to get there. He goes, oh, really, Juan? Oh, it's brand new. It's my father's. Well, just give it a go. So he was able to get the truck. And we didn't have the cameras, we didn't have anything, but we wanted to go.
mm.
And very short parenthesis is we were walking down Westwood, and one of the crew said, look, this is Sammy's camera shop. Oh, this is good. We went in, and Sammy inside, the owner said, Tomas, where you been? Come on in. You want anything? Just take it and just bring it back. Just give me $100 after all this is done. Oh God, these are French 16 millimeter camera. And
Wow.
you know,
Fantastic.
yeah, a UR 1000 tape recorder with a Sennheiser microphone. I mean, that costs thousands. Go ahead
Wow.
and take that. Just bring it, okay? Just bring it back. Okay, but I'll
Wow.
bring it back. Okay, don't worry about it. And so he gave us all the things we really needed to accomplish the journey. We went, we met the people, we took photographs, we interviewed, we recorded songs, we recorded the talks. We went to the Sierra, we went to the coast, we went into the rainforest, and we were greeted with a warm, open arms. And people probably said, well, who are these crazy Chicanos? But they didn't. And everyone let us into their home.
Mm.
And we came back maybe 2 months later, late. to go to class. I was 2 months late. Uh, but that was the idea. Let's meet our people instead of just talk about being this and being that. And we don't even know who our
Yeah.
ancestors are. And we don't
Yeah.
even know how they live right now. We're just talking about it, making posters and writing poems. That's not going to cut it. We
Mhm.
have to be there and feel it and see it and sit by the elders and the families and offer them whatever we can when we get there.
Oh,
So that was 1970.
1970. Wow, fantastic. You had to meet your ancestors and
We got to meet our people. Like,
wonderful.
like right now, Peggy, if we all did that right now, if we just sat across the table together, we probably would solve all the differences and divisions. If you could just sit down, just
Mm-hmm.
sit down, and say, "Hey, how you doing? Oh, my name's Peggy. Oh, good. Good to meet you, Peggy. Hey, my name's Juan," or my granddaughter calls me Juan.
Be a community together. Yeah, take
Yeah,
care of each other instead of feeling like enemies, and the fear that comes from the unknown in our national politics today. I see a lot of fear mongering of those people coming to invade us, and they don't know who those people are, and to meet them and say these, to feel a connection with the people and
that
understand
is true.
that's
Yeah, so let's sit together and maybe even take a sweat lodge together. That'll do it.
oh,
That
wow.
will do it. But right, just like Martin Buber said, and a great poet and human being and thinker and philosopher, dialogue. He said dialogue. We need to have dialogue. He
Right.
also liked theater and art, as you know.
Mm.
But dialogue, I said, that's true. Can't we just sit down and forget this invader bit? There's
Yeah.
this contamination of blood idea,
Oh,
which is not
yeah,
true,
that's
right?
ridiculous. And to be
Let's
human
just
together and to have respect for each other and to know each other to start with. Yeah, that I think it's the unknown. The fear of the unknown is powerful. But when you know each other, there's so much that's solved. So Linda's poem, how do you see it speaking to the social context today?
I think it's great. I think she's right on time. And I think her discussion that you had, your interview, that, like I said, is like a master class. I
Mm,
would put that interview in every social studies class,
mm,
creative writing class,
wow,
Chicano, Latino, Latinx, Latin American class, gender class.
she was
And
brilliant.
and that was a great exchange of questions and
Mm,
responses. And her reading was an amazing, vocal, her voice,
mm,
and how she was really uh, getting out of who she was and really feeling the poet reading, that inner voice was coming out. And that's the voice we all want, not just from, as they say in Spanish, de dientes para fuera, from the teeth out. We, we don't want, we don't want that voice. We want
no.
our inner self voice.
Yeah, from the heart, from the soul. Yeah, she did. And
Exactly. And
it
she,
struck me as like with all the like big, scary, stories and issues going on around society, to take
mm,
a tender little pequeña little voice of a little girl, a very fragile, vulnerable voice, and her perspective, her experience, that was beautiful, like draws you into it to see what it's like for a little girl. And there's so many the little children who are coming across the border and dealing with that issue. Yeah, I thought it was very beautiful. It wasn't, antagonistic. It was like just here's exposing this beautiful point of view of this child.
yes, and as you say that, and as you said, the Pequeña Joanna, it's an interesting ending. Now that you said that, it's kind of a very personal, don't you think? It's a very personal relationship. You say, Pequeña Joanna, semilla de manzana,
Mhm.
turn yourself into eyes. This is like the sister speaking, or the mother speaking, or of course, it's the inner voice speaking, the
Mhm.
speaker speaking,
Mhm.
or that inner self speaking, or that magical figure all of a sudden that appears and speaks
Mhm.
to Joanna. Very nice. It's a kind of a surprising ending. It just breaks away from the whole poem. So I would also encourage that kind of, I would call it a just for fun. I would call it an interruption, but it is an interruption.
Mm.
It's good to put that surprise in a poem. You know, you write, you got some great stuff, and it's going good, and it feels good, and you got good comments in the workshop, and you can't wait. But it all goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And this poem just jumps and breaks away, definitely breaks away in those last two lines. And who is this Joanna? And whose voice is this? And it's in italics, and it's also in Roman. And all of a sudden, it broke away from everything like ice. Ice breaks away, and all of a sudden, you have a floating stanza out of nowhere. And it's a good example of another way to write a poem. Just break away from the poem that you love so much, and me too. We're all enthralled by ourselves, which is what we do,
Mm.
and just break away from it, and
Yeah.
and bring in a couple of lines. The bard and italics, italics are not allowed in a poem anymore. You're gonna go to the
Oh,
you
really?
go to
I
the
didn't know
dark.
that rule, so okay.
You're gonna go to the no room.
Oh.
And this last two lines are actually perhaps bigger than the rest of what's before those two lines, those three stanzas. These two lines may be the full poem. And
Wow.
so when you break away, you discover something. I just noticed that. Very
Mm.
nice. Yeah, and the way you said it too.
Mm.
So I love that interview. I think it's a master class. I think
Well,
it's a
you're definitely layering on top of it a bigger your context, and it's beautiful. So back to the art contest. What was it like as the judge? I mean, we've heard about what you love about her poem, which is so much. What was the process like when you were looking at the other poems as well? And so how did it differ from the other things?
I guess this one stood out once again because of the terrain it's covering and of the materials that are in the poem.
Mm.
And this whole thing about ice, there's ice, and then there's ice, and then there's and turning the self into ice, not yourself, but your self into ice. And it was most interesting. I could imagine, I could pretend you never existed and walk across the desert a dream. Just those first three lines, it's over. Those first three lines, it's over. The price has come down. Just those last two lines, it's over. The price has come down and is available on the table. It's hard to judge. We were all writing poems. We were all submitting poems. I remember submitting poems, and I remember them going absolutely nowhere. And I applied to NEA, back then, and when I had like two dimes and I had a little family and a new child, a just recently born child, and I was hoping I would get a grant, but zero. As a matter of fact, I got a comment said, "No good, no good here."
Mm.
And I feel for the poets, that we apply for prizes
Mm.
and we want to get our poetry out. I know that feeling and I know that effort. And we write something and we are our own poets and we're in a little corner somewhere or walking. I used to write while I was walking. I'd love to do that, but could be a little dangerous. And so it's hard to judge those poems. This one stood out because it has so many variables and ingredients addressing us, addressing children, addressing the migrants, it's teaching us. And it also has so many good things in it. A little girl, it talks about dreams, it talks about the desert, it talks about never existing, just off the bat, never existing. Existing. Such a big item to exist. Uh, Back in the 60s, but go back to UCLA, everything was about Jean-Paul Sartre. Everything was about existentialism. I go, oh man, that sounds great, man. Oh, I want to know about Jean-Paul Sartre. Oh yeah, philosophy. I was totally into philosophy. Angela Davis was teaching existentialism at UCLA. Of course, I love the issue of the borderland and the migrants. It's a very big issue. And I liked all the changes in the poem, different gears, like the last three lines of the last big stanza. If you can be quiet, if you can be that useful, if you can be that slate gray. Just those last three lines, they're most interesting. And they're very different from everything else. So there's a lot of changes in color, a lot of changes in tone. And then that italic line, and then the ones that are just jagging around on the first one, two, three, four lines. Ice, are you ice? I am a flag. I can be quiet. I can be quiet. I go, God, where's this thing going? So see, that's the poem that stands out for me. It's doing many things that are working together, and yet they're so different. And words that are interesting, like properties. Properties, two grand properties. Properties is such a funny word, and you've never existed. It's such an odd and strong, and something's going on with those first three words. And then I could pretend. Okay, all right.
But she's giving you like little words that suggest a big world behind each of these properties, the ice, the girl, and it's like all these words that she's just hinting at. And you're like seeing a big,
Yeah,
picture behind it that
yeah, yeah.
intrigues,
So,
draws you up.
right, you're right. So imagine yourself. You're ready to write, but imagine yourself kind of like a dancer with a lot of moves. A dancer with a lot of moves. You're
Mhm.
gonna lift your hands. You're gonna kick out your feet. You're gonna do a little Michael Jackson moon shuffle. Or you're gonna do a spin.
Yeah.
And
Now
then,
you're speaking my language. I teach dance.
there you go. So there's a lot of moves you can make. You can tap, you can shuffle your feet, you can kick a foot, you can try to spin. You may even want to sit on the floor and do something on the floor. Uh, so 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 we like the word properties and the phrase you never existed. All that's inside, see? So when we're writing, just bring stuff out. Just bring stuff out, a a red can of tomatoes. Just bring it out and say it, put it on the poem. Red can of tomatoes, a broken plate from the planet. What on earth does that mean? Well, I put it on the poem. That's right. I just put it on the poem. A broken plate from a planet.
Um,
Okay, Juan. All right. I don't know about that. Doesn't make any sense, but go ahead. So just bring things out. You're in a cafeteria, get a big tray, go, I want some Jello. I'll take some of that. Give me a cornbread with Jello. Yeah, I don't care. Come on. And give me, I kind of like salmon. I don't want to torture salmon anymore. I kind of believe in animals but okay, I'll take a little bit of salmon. So
yeah.
you got salmon, you got Jello, you got this cherry Jello, and then you got cornbread. So fill up your tray, fill it up.
Ah,
Pencil, put a pencil in there, and just fill it up with stuff. And then when you're writing, bang, 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 bang. Just throw it in there. You're a
ah,
weaver from New Mexico. Okay, you're gonna weave this beautiful sarape with different colors, different kinds of threads, and you're at the loom. You're at the loom. Put red, put purple, put burnt sienna, and
mm,
put wild blue, and
wow.
put deep blue, and put hot pink,
Like this
and that.
mosaic of pieces that are all each unique and each have their color and flavor, and you just put them all together.
Exactly. So you can see that in this poem. There's fish ponds, there's peaches, there's deserts, there's existence, there's slate gray, there's a mother, and there's properties, and there's fences. You see, she pulled all this out. She had her cafeteria tray,
Mhm.
and
Oh,
it
wow.
had all these goodies on it, and then she put them into the poem. Uh, Ed Hirsch, Ed Hirsch, as you know, is a really good poet. He's president of the Guggenheim Foundation in New York City, and he has amazing books on poetry, with poetry, and I would get some of his books. But he uses the word ingredients. I had never heard it like that. He goes, "Oh, the ingredients of the poem." I go, "What? Ingredients? What is this? Cooking or what?" Uh, but I like that word, ingredients. So sometimes when we're writing a poem, we lack ingredients. We're just going, oh yeah, I walked outside. It was, there was a Honda, and it was a red Honda. But you see, it's becoming weak because our ingredients are very few.
Mm,
And I like ingredients. You don't have to, like a haiku doesn't have those kind of ingredients, but it slams and just how many? What is it? 3 lines and 15 syllables or so.
mhm.
But it's a very revealing poem. That's good too. So I would work on ingredients, and I would work on when I saw her, some of these lines just floating in space in the first 4 or 5 lines, and I saw the last two, and I saw this by yourself stanza to the right, and the other stanza is kind of broken in two. There's a lot of good things going on, but I like the subject. I also like the subject a lot.
This has been wonderful. And thank you so much for all your brilliant insight. Now I've got a bunch more ingredients in my brain I have to sort through and cook it into a casserole, I guess.
Right. Try it. Use the word casserole. Use the word.
Yeah.
I bet you nobody in Santa Cruz is using the word casserole in a poem.
I
Casserole.
think you're right. I would be so counterculture here.
So get yourself a whole stack of funky ingredients. Like you go to a used clothes store, there's little cups and there's.
My mom that was the only place she shopped for me, was the thrift store.
I use the word thimble. What's the word that you just said a while ago?
I don't know.
Yeah, that was a good one. That was a good one. So
Oh.
use the word, for example, let's do a little tray. Let's do a baby tray, okay? I want to put the word thimble in there. Now you put a word in there.
Oh, okay.
Start with your mom.
Teapot.
Teapot, thimble, and let's put a city word. Out in the city, we're walking down in the city. You just grab something, put it on the
Post.
thimbles, posts, and
Bird's nest.
bird's nest. Good going. You find them on the floor sometimes. Thimble, bird nest, and posts. Okay, that's the title of your poem, people.
Wow. Okay. I got to write some poetry here. Now I've got some ingredients. I've got the instruction. This is great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, get yourself a tray of ingredients and then just write and throw them out in the poem. Do not even think. Do not even think.
Wow.
That's
Homework lesson at the end. Thank you, teacher. Thank you, professor. Give us our homework assignment at the very end. Well, that wraps up a wonderful talk with my great guest and scintillating Juan Felipe Herrera for the time together. Is it okay if I talk about some of your other work?
Sure.
All right. Herrera's publications include 14 collections of poetry, prose, short stories, young adult novels, and picture books for children, with 21 books in total in the last decade, which is no surprise after hearing how prolifically imaginative you are with words. His 2007 book, 187 Reasons Mexicanos Can't Cross the Border, examines the questions of identity on the U.S.-Mexican border. His first book was Rebozos of Love from Tolteca Publications, 1974, and his last book was Every Day We Get More Illegal from City Lights Publishers in 2020. He has a long list of awards and fellowships. I will name some of them: the America's Award, 2008 National Book Critics Circle Award, 2009 Penn Beyond Margins Award, 2010 Guggenheim Fellowship, the Breadlow Fellowship in Poetry, California Arts Cultural Grants 4 times, Ezra Jack Keats Award twice awarded, National Endowment for the Arts Writers Fellowships Award twice awarded, New York Public Library Outstanding Book for High School Students Award, Smithsonian Children's Book of the Year Award, Stanford University's Chicanos Fellowship, UC Berkeley Regents Fellowship, 2021 Los Angeles Review of Books, UC Riverside Creative Writing Lifetime Achievement Award, and the 2023 Frost Medal. So thank you, Juan Felipe, for your time.
Oh, thank you so much, Peggy. You're wonderful, and you asked the best questions. And I'm really, I learned a lot from your YouTube interview with Linda Ravenswood. It was fabulous. You're doing great.
Oh, good. Thank you so much. I feel very affirmed. So thank you to our guest, Professor Juan Felipe Herrera. This has been In the Reads, the podcast of San Jose State University's Read Magazine, California's oldest literary journal. Find us online at readmag.org. Thanks for listening.